Welcome to this pre-recorded conference presentation, The Changing Experiences of Teaching in Higher Education, the Online Teacher, which is delivered by myself, Claire Aitchison, and my colleague Richard McGuinness on behalf of the whole research team. Even before COVID-19, we saw an increasing number of academics teaching online, and some of those were delivering already developed courses in circumstances quite unlike the regular faculty environments they were used to. The global pandemic has rubber-stamped new ways of teaching, thus spotlighting our relative lack of knowledge about teachers' experiences in this fully online environment. This timely reminder highlights the need for research, and in 2018 and 19, we undertook a study of 29 online teachers. Notably, unlike some recent studies, this was not a group thrown into the environment by the pandemic, but rather teachers hired specifically to teach whole degrees fully online. Online learning is now routine in higher education, albeit accelerated by COVID, and as a result there is a strong and growing body of literature. Much of this focuses on students' experiences, online course design and development processes, and teachers' adoption of and capabilities in the use of digital technology. Yet, there is relatively less known in a holistic sense about teachers' experiences in regard to their sense of selves, identity, and perceived roles and responsibilities when they are employed to teach in a fully online environment. We took from the literature a number of conceptual frames that we thought had particular resonance to our aims. Of course, being an online teacher shares many similarities to being a classroom teacher, but there are also some significant differences, and it is these that we were particularly interested in finding out about. As we know, teaching requires more than simply technical, pedagogical, and content knowledges. Teachers' beliefs, identity, and conceptions of teaching work in combination to influence what teachers aspire to do and what they can actually do in a given context. For example, England et al. Argue that teachers' conceptions of online teaching and technologies work together to account for the success of student learning. Kembler's perspective of teacher conceptions as individuals' beliefs about teaching and learning provide a basis for recognising that these conceptual aspects interface with complex and changing understandings of roles, identity, agency and structure in teachers' daily practices in higher education. Personal beliefs and conceptions of teaching underscore the range of personal identities which are available to teachers in their contexts in which they work, and they are likely to manifest as preferences and inclinations towards certain practices and ideals. Our study sought to understand the lived experiences of online teachers, their beliefs and motivations. The study was guided by the following questions. What were the expectations and capabilities of online teachers that are brought to the job? And what are the experiences of these teachers delivering courses which were already developed by others?
Firstly, just briefly, some information about the context of this study. UniSA Online was formed in late 2016 as part of a strategic initiative at the University of South Australia. The project, as part of the digital learning strategy, planned to deliver 12 undergraduate degrees across all disciplines fully online. This has now increased to 21 degrees. As well as delivering fully online courses, the distinguishing feature was the separation of course development and delivery. This development and delivery was overseen by a standalone unit of the institution, UniSA Online, or UO. UO is responsible for its own marketing, support and delivery of courses. Courses were developed using an established collaborative approach between the Central Learning and Teaching Unit and academic subject matter experts. Ready-to-teach courses were then provided to a teaching team, and course delivery commenced in January 2018 with 4 10-week teaching blocks per year. New teams of teachers, online course facilitators and tutors were employed by UniSA Online to teach these already developed courses. Devolving the delivery of these courses to a team of specialist online teachers presented an opportunity to better understand their unique role and examine their experiences as an emerging group in higher education. In late 2019, with ethics approval, we undertook a mixed method study comprising of an anonymous online survey to provide primarily demographic data and our focus groups to obtain more in-depth accounts of teachers' experiences. Our participants were online course facilitators working for UniSA. We achieved a 72% response rate for the survey and a 34% response rate for the focus group. That's 10 participants split across 3 focus group sessions. Focus groups lasted between 60 and 80 minutes and were interdisciplinary. The audio recordings were made, later transcribed and de-identified alongside additional observational notes taken during the discussions. Transcripts were thematically coded and analysed using NVivo by the research team both individually and collectively. It's important to note our study took place in the early stages of the establishment of UniSA Online, as the academic delivery model, teaching teams and processes and practices were still evolving. Indeed, we feel strongly that the last 18 months many of our perceptions and experiences have changed, and thus we aim to revisit this study by re-engaging with the original participants to gauge their more recent perceptions. And now to the survey results. The online course facilitator cohort was quite diverse in terms of demographics. The majority, 86%, had commenced employment in the role 6 months or more prior to participating in the research project. Most OCFs, 79%, had more than 3 years previous experience in higher education before starting the role. And all had some teaching experience, either in face-to-face, blended or online environments. Interestingly, the majority, 67%, had never taught online before. The survey respondents represented a balanced cross-section of disciplinary teaching areas at the university and taught a median of 6 courses per year, with some responsible for the facilitation of up to 12 courses per year. We have reported elsewhere on the findings derived from the survey data. That work noted the general satisfaction of this group of online teachers with their experience of teaching already developed fully online courses and with the quality of these online courses. This slide represents an overview of findings from the focus group. The focus groups gave us the opportunity to delve more deeply into the teaching beliefs and explore how they understood their roles and practices in the online environment. Open-ended questions and prompts encouraged free-flowing discussions between the interdisciplinary groups, providing rich exchanges of experiences, perceptions, and comparisons with face-to-face teaching. The findings throw a light on how the digital environment is reconfiguring online teachers' sense of their role, their identities and beliefs, and their perception of agency. The first thing to note is the reporting of both joy and disappointment, and contradictory, even surprising, responses. For example, we observed some people felt a lack of autonomy, even though the delivery model aimed to empower them. On the other hand, participants emphasised the joy of performing teacherly acts online. Like so many experiences of teaching, teaching online was identified as both enlivening and sometimes frustrating, sometimes satisfying and sometimes limiting. We tried to unpack this further by analysing the transcripts under the themes of role, identities and agency.
Exploring the theme of roles. Participants reflected on a sense of loss and gain in their roles. On one hand, they missed connections to a class of students. I missed the connection with individual students. On the other, they felt a greater sense of collegiality with other academics, arising from a shared physical working environment and a supportive culture. There is much more opportunity to talk to colleagues about things to do with your course and your teaching. And there were also more opportunities to be creative. I feel like I'm so much more creative with the way I teach because I'm not limited to a 1-hour lecture and a 2-hour tutorial. People identified how time and workload impacted what they could do and what they'd like to do. It's like you're stretched, said one person. It's 24/7. It's a treadmill. And there's no time to stop and reflect. The third aspect that arose in the data was that there was a sense that roles were shifting. Participants reflected on how their roles seemed to be moving from being teacher-focused to being more of an administrator. We are doing a lot of administration tasks, and I can see that my role is transitioning from being the first-line teacher to being the teacher manager. The second theme identified in the data was a sense of identities, old identities, new identities, and a certain degree of uncertainty about one's identity. Identity is shaped by personal perceptions and beliefs, but also by how others see one. Participants feared their identity as content specialists could be lost as they were provided with ready packaged courses. I feel like I was hired because of my discipline knowledge, and that's what I really value and can offer students. But a lot of these things are sort of eroding. This was more acute for those who had to teach courses in which they were not a discipline specialist. I hate teaching the stuff that I'm not a specialist in. I know that you can do it, however, because the content is there. Participants were reimagining their sense of self by also assessing the advantages of teaching quality-controlled, well-constructed courses and with supportive expertise available to assist them when they need it. Having that team-based environment really helped solve issues within the day. A third theme that arose was the notion of agency, perceptions and compromises. Agency for these teaching academics was sometimes redefined or perceived as constrained. For some participants, the lack of involvement in course design proved frustrating. However, this appeared to be very dependent on their relationship with the on-campus course writer or course coordinator. Some course coordinators understand that you're equals and that your work is almost like team teaching, but some are very possessive of their courses, and so in those instances it's almost about seeking permission, which is not a nice place to be. Some participants noted that this lack of agency to change courses was different from their previous academic experiences. As academics, although it's quite common that you get given somebody else's course, you get the opportunity to change the lectures and other components, and it does become your own. However, several participants acknowledged better outcomes for students. I do think there is a flip side in that I like that there is some quality assurance measures to the courses. There's also consistency across the courses, and there's parallel to the courses on campus. So I think those things are all really good. Participants also worried that despite their lack of agency over the course, they were still seen as the ones who were responsible for its success. The buck stops with you, and it stops with you for the overall course satisfaction expressed by the students. So we now reach the final slides, and what are our conclusions? This study has pointed to perceptions of loss and gain in relation to teachers' experiences in the fully online environment, and these speak directly to conceptions of teaching, that is, roles, identity and agency. The study identified challenges to former ways of working for teachers and also showed how they were addressing and overcoming this. Significantly, it identified shifts and uncertainty about the roles and identities of these online teachers. Perhaps not surprising given that the interviews occurred within the first 18 months of the establishment of this delivery model. Both wins and losses were identified. When online teachers speak about these changes, how different are their experiences to those of teaching academics in classroom? And does the involvement of others, such as course designers, course writers and on-campus course coordinators, signal an unbundling or a dispersal of teacherly roles? And what are the impacts, and for whom? There's no doubt that there is change and transformation, the redefining of roles and changing of identities. This seems to be happening. Our job is to identify and investigate these changes and to lead discussions as to the impacts for teachers and for students, for teaching and learning in an increasingly online higher educational context. And lastly, just to note, the data was collected pre-COVID and when the teaching processes and practices were still evolving. This context has changed significantly since then, and we're looking to re-interview the same group, seeking their reflections again in a more mature structural context and a changed post-COVID world. What may have seemed foreign a few years ago may now be more normal than we would ever have foretold. Thank you.